The Architecture of Mental Sovereignty, a complete master summary. In the summer of 1938, fresh off the massive success of Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill realized he had only mapped out half of the human psyche. If his previous work was an instruction manual for building a vehicle for success, his newly drafted manuscript was a raw interrogation of the invisible brake system holding humanity back. Deemed too dangerous for its blistering critique of public education, institutionalized religion, and societal governance, the text was locked away in a family vault for 73 years until its public release in 2011. The publication of Outwitting the Devil fundamentally altered Hill's legacy. It shifted his philosophy from a capitalistic pursuit of material accumulation to a profound blueprint for cognitive liberation. Written as an adversarial dialogue between Hill and the devil, the book uses a brilliant literary device that modern clinical psychology refers to as narrative externalization. By giving a distinct voice to human limitation, Hill separates individual identity from dysfunctional behaviors. In modern neurobehavioral terms, Hill's devil is not a theological entity. It is the personification of systemic entropy, evolutionary fear, and the unconscious autopilot. It represents the ancient survival-driven regions of the brain, the amygdala and basal ganglia, which prioritize immediate comfort, social conformity, and energy conservation over deliberate, long-term self-actualization. The pathology of drifting and the 6 great fears. The primary weapon of this unconscious autopilot is a psychological state Hill labels drifting. To drift is to surrender volitional sovereignty to external environmental currents. From a neuroscience perspective, drifting represents the absolute dominance of the brain's default mode network in the absence of an active, goal-directed central executive network. When a person lacks a definitive objective, the prefrontal cortex abdicates control, leaving the mind to run on passive reaction to environmental triggers, social pressures, and digital algorithms. Drifting manifests through a highly recognizable suite of destructive behaviors. Procrastination. This is fundamentally an emotional regulation problem, not a time management issue. It is the immediate prioritization of short-term mood repair over long-term cognitive goals. Indecision. Driven by extreme loss aversion, an individual overestimates the risk of a wrong choice, while completely ignoring the compounding cost of making no choice at all. Conformity. The total capitulation of individuality to the group mind, triggered by evolutionary hardware that views social exclusion as a literal threat to survival. Dependency on external validation, operating from an external locus of control, where self-worth is entirely rented from the opinions and feedback of the surrounding environment. To maintain this state of passivity, the unconscious autopilot exploits 6 foundational psychological vulnerabilities. These anxieties paralyze executive function, forcing the mind into a permanent defensive posture. The 6 great fears. Poverty, a scarcity mindset that shifts cognitive processing from strategic investment to immediate survival. Criticism, rejection sensitivity that triggers the same neural networks associated with physical pain. Ill health, a hyper-focus on somatic symptoms that elevates chronic cortisol and degrades biological vitality. Loss of love, anxious attachment patterns that sacrifice personal integrity for relationship preservation. Old age, existential dread regarding the decline of fluid intelligence and societal relevance. Death, the ultimate anchor of human anxiety, driving frantic distractions over meaningful legacy building. The mechanics of hypnotic rhythm. The most profound behavioral concept in the text is the law of hypnotic rhythm. This is Hill's term for what modern science calls neuroplasticity, long-term potentiation, and habit automation. The brain operates as an efficiency engine, constantly looking to turn repetitive actions into automated routines to conserve glucose. When a thought pattern or action is repeated, the underlying neural pathways experience myelination, the wrapping of a protective sheath that multiplies signal transmission speeds. Hypnotic rhythm is entirely indifferent to the utility of the habit. It simply automates whatever you feed it. This creates 2 distinct developmental trajectories. The downward spiral. When an individual yields to short-term comfort or avoidance, hypnotic rhythm solidifies those choices into an unshakable psychological mold. Skipping a task or choosing a distraction provides immediate emotional relief, which the brain registers as a reward. Hypnotic rhythm locks this loop into place, rapidly building a default state of learned helplessness, where the individual slowly loses faith in their own capability to change. The upward spiral. Conversely, when an action is backed by explicit intent and executed despite emotional resistance, completing the task triggers a strategic release of dopamine. This chemical reward accelerates positive myelination, transforming a difficult conscious effort into an effortless, automated expression of identity. Through hypnotic rhythm, character ceases to be an exhausting daily battle and becomes a structural highway of the self. The 7 pillars of cognitive liberation. To disrupt the momentum of drifting and break free from systemic conditioning, Hill details an operational framework built on 7 foundational principles. Definiteness of purpose. You must develop absolute clarity of direction. This coordinates high-level cognitive processing and tunes the reticular activating system to filter environmental noise, identifying resources and opportunities that align with your primary objective, while neutralizing decision fatigue. Mastery over self. True autonomy requires the conscious regulation of emotional impulses. This represents the absolute triumph of the prefrontal cortex over the limbic system, relying on delayed gratification and environmental design rather than depleting raw willpower. Learning from adversity. This is the operationalization of post-traumatic growth. By leveraging cognitive reframing, an independent thinker treats every failure not as an identity statement, but as raw feedback and a catalyst for skill acquisition. Controlling environmental influence. Through the function of mirror neurons and social contagion, your default standards are heavily dictated by the average baseline of your closest associations. Reclaiming your mind demands a ruthless audit of your social circle, digital information diet, and physical spaces. Time and habit permanence. This emphasizes behavioral compounding. A 1% daily shift in execution appears trivial in the short term. But over time, hypnotic rhythm converts small, unbroken daily iterations into an unshakable elite identity. Harmony. Sustainable success requires systemic balance. Your career, physical health, and personal relationships must operate as an integrated ecosystem. Sacrificing one to fuel another increases your allostatic load, inevitably resulting in burnout or systemic collapse. Caution. This is the intentional elimination of hyperbolic discounting, the cognitive bias to overvalue immediate rewards while ignoring future consequences. Caution is not fear. It is the implementation of strategic foresight, such as performing a pre-mortem analysis to calculate and plan for structural risks before acting. Modern technological application. While written nearly a century ago, Hill's philosophy is strikingly prophetic when applied to our current digital landscape. The modern world has highly optimized the very tools of distraction Hill warned would trap human consciousness. Recommendation algorithms on social media platforms function as engineered delivery systems for the devil. By feeding the brain a hyper-personalized, continuous stream of short-term dopamine hits, these platforms induce a state of passive consumption, digital drifting on a mass scale. To remain an independent thinker today, your attention must be treated as your most sacred asset, aggressively insulated from algorithmic capture. Similarly, modern consumer culture exploits the fears of poverty and criticism, leveraging easy credit to lock individuals into loops of lifestyle inflation. People buy items they do not need, with money they do not have, to secure validation from people they do not respect. This creates a psychological trap, forcing individuals to stay in unfulfilling, high-stress roles to service debt, completely stripping away the financial autonomy required to take meaningful career or entrepreneurial risks. The operational blueprint. To bridge the gap between abstract philosophy and immediate daily execution, you must run an explicit mental operating system. The input shield. Protect the first 45 minutes of your morning from all digital inputs. Use this highly suggestible window to review your primary purpose and execute deep work. A friction matrix. Intentionally design your environment to maximize physical friction for negative behaviors, e.g., leaving your phone in another room, while removing all friction for positive, purpose-aligned habits. The weekly audit. Every Sunday, explicitly review your actions against social conformity, emotional reactivity, and avoidance strategies. Extract the data, reframe the setbacks, and adjust your trajectory. Ultimately, mental sovereignty is an ongoing act of conscious rebellion. The forces of limitation only hold power when you choose to live on autopilot. True freedom is reclaim the exact moment you define your path, master your impulses, and assume absolute responsibility for your mind.